Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Yes, weather was not cooperating with my flight plans. So I had maybe nothing less than 5 delays coming out of Newark. Of course, I committed to doing this because this is good, important work that I love being a part of. And we planned this months ago. And then Verizon does what corporate America does, and they put something else on my calendar that made me go to Newark. Now, I am based in Dallas. So how many of you have flown in and out of the Newark airport? Okay, so you can understand how I felt, because that is an airport that is just not easy to do business with when anything happens that's not part of the plan. So after 5 delays, and I bought 2 tickets, I found a whole nother ticket. I was like, I'll just buy it just to have it as a backup. It got canceled. My flight kept getting delayed. Then the pilot timed out. I was like, I am not getting off this plane. You are getting me to Greenville, or at least Charlotte. And that's what happened. So I got in about 4:20 this morning. Yeah, but you know what? I'm feeling all right. I have not slept yet. That's okay, because I had coffee, and I'm a woman, and this is how we do it, okay? So, okay, now that we got that all out, I feel better. Let me set up what I want to make sure I cover with you. So I want to talk a little bit, I'll recap my career a little bit, but I really want to tell a story about how I think women can navigate in the workplace. And I'll tell it from my point of view, of course, but it's kind of reflective of, I think, lessons that apply across audiences like this one. So this will be a little difficult to read, probably, so let me just share this quote. This quote really kind of sits with me, it connects with me, and it's from the founder of Spanx. So, ladies, you're familiar with Spanx, okay. So, don't be intimidated by what you don't know. That can be your greatest strength, and ensure that you don't do what everyone else does, right? You don't do things the same way that everyone else does them. And that's an important quote, because if you recall how I started my career at Verizon, it was in the mailroom. I joined the company, I knew nothing about the industry. I did not carry a cell phone. I did not have anything to do with the technology that Verizon was selling. I had no point of view on what we were doing. I just needed a job. I was a young mom. I was just trying to give my son a better life than I had, and so I jumped in. I learned everything I needed to know about the business from the mailroom, because that is where our customers communicated with us. At the time, they were certainly calling into the call center, which I later explored, but some people at that time took a lot of time out of their day to write how they felt about our company, the service that was being provided. And there was nobody in the company at that time that was taking that letter and doing anything with it. So I used it to not just learn about the business, but to really learn where I fit in the business. So this quote is important, because if I stopped at what I only knew, I would not be standing here today. And ladies, I'm here to tell you, that is one of our biggest challenges, is that we have to push ourselves to do the next step. We have to find our own voice, our own courage, our own confidence. And that's why I love this quote. I could have been intimidated by what I did not know, or I could have decided to be curious. And that's what I chose to do. So when I think about how it all boils down for me, it's 4 things: fit, commitment, action, and then you gotta make it count. Because if we just check the box and we don't make it count, we miss our moment. Okay, and this really, again, it applies to men, it applies to women. I'm talking to you from a woman's point of view, but I think that you would find this could probably apply to almost anybody you know in your situation, at work, at home, your nonprofit work, your community. So let's start with fit. So you might not be able to always pick your boss, but it's fair to say that you probably pick the company, right? You have to apply or at least accept the job, so you pick the company most often. The question becomes, do you pick a company that has the right fit for you. Because you are you, and you will grow, and you will change, and you will evolve, and people will give you advice along the way, and you will be shaped by your experiences, and that's all good. But you are still you, and that's the greatest value that you bring to a business. And whether you are a woman or someone from a diverse background, or you have had international experience, or you speak multiple languages, you have a value that you bring. So your job, your first job, is to make sure you're choosing a company that you fit with. And I'll give you an example. I fit with Verizon. I know that I fit with Verizon because I can go to our website and I could research, who does this company think they are? Who do they want to be? What do they stand for? I know what they sell. I know how they make money, but that doesn't necessarily define exactly all of what Verizon wants to be known for. So if you look at this sheet, what I'd ask you to pay attention to are the items in red. So the items in red are the things that resonate the most with me. I care about young people. I am from an underserved community, and so that's important to me. I also grew up in a household with a mother who had domestic violence in her life. So I care about at-risk women and children. I also care about the privacy of everyone. I very much respect diversity and inclusion, and I am all about equal pay. So with that being said, in just this statement, and there's so much more said about a company on its website, but in just this one statement, I can already tell I might have a good fit here. I might not only be able to satisfy a career, but I might actually be able to satisfy some personal values that I have, things that are important to me, where I might volunteer on behalf of the company, issues I might be able to go out and be a part of, moments like this where I can stand on a stage and tell you my story from the mailroom to a market president because my company believes in these things and I fit in those things. So ladies, gentlemen, make sure when you're looking for your company, you don't just look for the logo, you find your fit, because that's the first step to finding your place in the workplace, especially as a woman. It's important because there's probably an opportunity for you to influence the company along the way. When we have women and diverse representation at the boardroom seat, when we have women making decisions in the company, then the company starts to shape in a way that is reflective of women and the things we value and how we can make a difference. So fit is very important. Okay, so when you think about commitment, this is what I want to make sure I get out today. So clarity, choice, and consequence. Far too often, I talk to individuals who know what they want to do. They know the job, they know the title, they know the department, but they do not know why. They don't know the why to their what. And that's important. Do you know that if you go to the 2016 Women in Workplace study by McKinsey and Company, they found that 43% of women felt like they could not make a difference, a positive impact as an executive in a company. So they don't pursue it. They don't see it as an interest of theirs because they don't think they can make a positive impact. 43%. It's 51% for men, yet they continue to go. And it's because they are more confident more often than women. And we feel like we need 99% of all the required components before we move for a job. And sometimes our male colleagues are okay at 60%, and they'll figure the rest of it out as they go. That's a reality, that's fine. We can change that though, by getting started with what might be a competitive advantage for you in the workplace. If you already know that nearly 50% of the people don't think they can make an impact, but they go for it anyway, what happens if you connect with your why? And I'll give you my example. So when I was at Verizon in the mailroom, I learned that my purpose in the company was going to be to drive positive change through customer feedback. And every assignment that I've done, every job I've accepted, links back to that why. Every one. It's not negotiable. There are lots of jobs I could do at Verizon, but they don't all directly impact the customer. I need to directly impact the customer. That is what fulfills me at work. So I use that to inform my choices. I also use it as a competitive advantage within the workplace. When you sit down to have a conversation for a job, or when you're telling your story and you're building your brand, remember what I'm saying to you. Everyone can tell you what they want. Very few can tell you why they want it. And the passion is in the why. The tough days, the rough assignments, the things that make you want to go to your car and maybe let a few tears out, those things can all be handled with passion. Passion is in your why. So your why to your what's an advantage point. It informs your choices. We will all want to control things that we can't control. It's pretty natural. If you're thinking through it at work and you can stay focused on what you can control and make those choices, you can go so much farther. That passion I just talked about will drive you. And I'll give you an example. If in this role you're in today, you make all the choices you could possibly make, right? You're controlling what you can control, but you are very passionate about the way the department is being run 4 levels above you. And there's some things that are happening 4 levels above you that are pushing its way down to where you are today. It's affecting how you do the job you do today. You can't 4 levels down necessarily control 4 levels up, but you can tap into your passion, make decisions and choices at the level you're at, use that to connect with your why, move to the next level, do it all over again, control what's in front of you, make the choices in front of you in that job, move to the next level, and you continue to progress through, driven by the why to your what, the passion behind your action, and making sure that you make choices, including applying for that next job. If decisions are being made 4 levels above you, and it's not impacting your job favorably, there's a good chance they need you 4 levels above you. They might not know it yet. And the way you perform in the job you're in, the choices you make that you control, can help you get there. If you get focused on choices you don't control, it is a distraction. Fight the distraction, focus on what you can control, influence every position you're in, climb, okay? Then I want to make sure we talk about consequence. So this is another big one that I learned at Verizon and with the help of my husband. So I should tell you, I have a husband and I have 2 children. I have a son who's 22 and I have a daughter who is 15. And I've been with my husband for 25 years and he is my best friend and my best partner for sure. And we sit down and we think about consequences. Everything you do has a consequence. And I think we think about consequence as a negative word, but it's really just an outcome, right? And we should expect an outcome with our actions. When you're making choices, there will be an outcome. So for the first 8 years of my career, we made a choice that we were not mobile. At Verizon, mobility is very important. As you build a corporate career, if you work for a company that is regional or has multiple satellite offices, mobility becomes important. But it can't be more important than the consequence. You have to understand the consequence of mobility, good, bad, or indifferent, but you need to know it. So for us, first 8 years could not be mobile. We knew when we said we were mobile, things were going to happen. You become more exposed, there's more opportunity, people meet you that you didn't know, and now all of a sudden your career is moving faster. And what comes with that are new conditions. So my career escalated, my daughter ended up going to many school systems so far, we've moved multiple times. My husband has not worked since 2012 because we've moved multiple times. And somebody's got to be at home and do the things that need to be done for our family at home. Many of my male colleagues have a wife that might stay home and do those same very things. Those were the consequences of being mobile at Verizon. We understood those consequences, and in 2007, we made a choice. I made a choice. I was clear on my why to my what. I controlled if I was mobile or not. I chose to be mobile, and the consequence was that my career escalated, and there were some family things that we had to care for. I expected that outcome. My husband expected that outcome. And as a result, we were able to move forward and stay committed to my career path. Making sense? Okay, all right, let me keep going. So let's talk a little bit about action. So as I reflect on action, I think about being a student of the business. So if you were here last, I might have mentioned it then too. I really, really believe in this idea of continuous learning. You have to be willing to not just know the data point, not really just know the result, but what's the insight there? What's the story to those numbers? How do you communicate that to someone else in a way that's meaningful? And I try to learn something from someone every day. Quite frankly, I'm in conversations all the time, and people use words and terms that I have never heard before. And you know what I do? I fake it till I make it, and then I go research the word, or I research the term, so that I can now understand what was just happening and how they were using it in context, and is that something I should study up on? Right now in my industry, eSIM is a big deal. It's a bit of a game changer in my industry. I had not heard of eSIM prior to a conversation I was in, about a year ago. No one came and said, hey, heads up, eSIM, here's what it is, here's what it's about. That's not what happened. I was in a conversation and they were going to town about eSIM, and I was like, what are they talking about? And I had to go own that. You have to be a student of the business. I could have been intimidated and I could have walked away, but instead I dug in and I made a choice, because I can control if I look up a word. That's something I can control. So be a student of the business. Build a network. And not just a network of a whole bunch of people, but a network of influencers and experts. There are things that people will know because they are just very good at it, or it's their line of work, it's their wheelhouse, it's what they do every day. And then there are people who are influential in your company. Know who these individuals are. Those that are influencers are people you want to get to know. How did they become an influencer? Why are they an influencer? How can you benefit from what they have done along the way? The experts are there to help fill your knowledge. They can tell you what you don't know and equip you to have a conversation and go places and be part of projects that you might not otherwise be a part of. So building a network is important, but people often make the mistake, I think, at work, at building a network of people, not necessarily a network of influencers. And then doing so, building a network allows you to share your body of work. And when you do this effectively, you earn sponsors. At Verizon, there is a very clear sponsor program. Mentors talk with you, sponsors talk for you. In order to enable women at work and make sure we have representation, we have a process where it's a talent evaluation system that happens. And we go in and we fill it out and we rate our individuals on their capabilities, what they want to do. We build development plans, etc. And then in my market, when we do a talent calibration, I require that we have at least one woman on every slate. So if we're going to consider a job, I need to see one woman on every slate because they exist. Do you know that not just at Verizon, but holistically off of that same study I referenced earlier, 46% of entry-level women or entry-level positions are held by women. You get to vice president, 29%. You get to the C-suite, 19%. That is an unacceptable reality. So first we need to apply for the job. But as an employer, as a leader, as a woman, I have a responsibility to make sure I make room, that I have a standard. And so every job slate has to have at least one woman. We will always hire the best, most qualified candidate, but women need to be considered. And because we're not yet the norm, we're not always understood. So we have to force a conversation to occur. And we do it through our hiring process. It is important to have sponsors so that you're on the list, so that someone's thinking about you because they know your quality of work and you have made sure they know where you want to go. Quickly, part of making sure people know where you want to go is by making your activity count. Performance reviews. Do you look forward to raise your hand if you look forward to your performance review? Yeah, exactly. I know. Some people are like halfway up. I kind of do. I'm going to tell you, totally look forward to it. Everyone gets at least one. And the reason you should look forward to it is because most leaders, they really struggle to give corrective feedback, but they struggle the most to give it to women. About 43% of leaders will tell you they struggle the most giving feedback to women that's a critique because they don't want to be perceived as hurtful. You need to let them know, ladies, you can take it. You have tough skin. You can take feedback. This is not something that they should be afraid of. You need to know how your business, how your leader, how your supervisor, you need to know how they view you. What will they say on your behalf? Are they a sponsor? When the job opens, are they going to be there with your name at the table? What else do you need to do? It can't just be an easy, passive discussion. You have to make your performance review count. It should be a two-way dialogue. You should go to it knowing you want to get something from it other than, good job for the last year. Appreciate your work. Thanks for being committed. You're performing. Good. Carry on. That's not enough. Make it count. Meetings. I sit in a lot of meetings, as you can imagine. And you know what I see happen often? We fight really hard to get into the room, and then sometimes we don't even sit at the table. Sometimes we sit at the edge around the back, and we leave room for somebody else to sit at the table. Or we get to the table and we don't use our voice. That is a moment that if you see your colleague do that, you have an opportunity to say, hey, no, there's a space right here. Come sit right here. You have an opportunity to bring somebody to the table. Make room. Remember what I talked about the job slate? Make room on the slate for people, for women. Make room at the table. Make that moment count. Make your voice heard because you have a point of view. If you think about everything that we talked to up to this point, you know your why to your what. You've made choices. You're a student of the business. You've gotten feedback from your performance review. You have something to contribute. Do not sit around the edge of the table, the back. Sit at the table. And then from a training standpoint, this is a good opportunity just to see who else is in the room with you. Who can you learn from? Are there experts there that we talked about earlier? I think that everyone cringes a little bit at required training. I know I do. If I have to go off for required training, I kind of do that. I have so many other things to do moment. But I will tell you when I get there, I'm all in because I need to know who else I'm competing with internally. That's one reason. The second reason is there's somebody there I can learn from. And so I take that opportunity and I try and learn as I go. I want to just close on this before we move to the panel. When I think about being a woman, and then a diverse woman on top of it, I think about this quote. I say this all the time. People already know that I'm different and I'm in the room. When I walk in, they know I'm there. Often I walk in, I'm the only woman in the room. I might be the only person of color in the room, so they know I'm there. The question is, how do I make my difference count? How do I take that unique moment that I've just been given and turn it into something that becomes part of my reputation, becomes part of my brand? I remember why I'm there. I earned it. I remember that we all came there to do a job, so let's do it. And then at the end of it, the conversation that we've had that I've been a part of because I sat at the table and I used my voice, that conversation should be the only thing they remember when I walk out of the room. Not that I was the only woman or that I might have been the only person of color. Those things contributed to my point of view, and that's what I left on the table. And that is how you could be a woman at work. And not just a woman, but you. Your beautiful, unique you. I encourage you and I welcome you to be a woman at work that moves through because you know who you are and you know what you're worth. With that, I'm going to close my portion and bring up the panel where we're going to continue the conversation And hopefully you'll get some questions ready, and we'll have a dialogue with our panel, and you can be a part of it. So with that, let's see. Let's invite up. We have 3 Athena Award winners. Now I'm going to do my very best to get the names right. I practiced earlier. I am not always the best with names, but I'm going to do my very best. If you would help me bring up Maurie Lawrence, is an attorney at Wyche and also serves as the chair of Wyche's executive committee and was an award winner with Athena in 2014. Is Maurie here? Oh, there you are. All right. Nice to see you. Thank you. Okay, also, if you could help me bring up Dr. Chip Wiper. He is the chair of the Greenville Health System OB-GYN department, and he was an Athena Award winner in 2015. Thank you. And our third panelist is Philip Kilgore, an attorney with Ogletree, Deakins, Nash, Smoak, and Stewart. PC Ogletree Deakins received the Athena Award in 2016. Congratulations. Thank you. All right, so we're going to share a mic now because I obviously lost one. And I just wanted to start with almost where I finished. So when you think about difference in the workplace, each of you probably had a moment where you brought some difference to the table, whether it was your experience, your passion. Can you think of a time when you took what was different about you and made it count? Anybody can go, for you have the mic.
Ladies first.
Oh, ladies first. There you go.
Oh, wow. Is it on? Yes?
I think
Can
so.
you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me? I think, honestly, every day I'm doing something where I'm different. I mean, on this panel, I'm different. I was the first in my family to go to college. I have a dual income family. My daughter is a cancer survivor. The point is that there's lots of ways to look at me, and in many circumstances, I'm bringing something that's different. I'm from South Carolina, but was educated outside of South Carolina. I'm an attorney that's now chair of my firm. That's the difference when I go to meetings and you walk in and they expect something different than chair. And so what that means is that I try to remember everybody in the room has a different perspective that they're bringing, and you really hope to bring that out, because I fully believe that if you can get the different perspectives and get people open to being vulnerable, you get to a better position, whether personally, with friendships, or professionally.
Excellent. Listen, I think that's a great example. So when she walked on the stage, look at all of that you would not have just known, but it's in her, it's who she is. So it's going to come out in her point of view. Her passion is going to be in certain pockets. She can leverage that to be the best person on a conversation of any of those topics, just because they were her experiences. That's her difference. And you got to own that, right? Very good. Excellent example. Anybody else?
Sure.
You ready? Yeah, there you go.
I think the question is, how am I different? A lot of times your difference is very similar to other people's differences, and so the experience I would share with you, maybe some others have shared these experiences, and that is by way of my background. I grew up in an environment where it was apparent to me that I was very fortunate to have the things that I had. And I was surrounded by a lot of very fine mentors, and they made a big impression on me. And I realized at some point in my life that I had an obligation to give back and to create opportunities for others. And just to give you an idea, as an example, my father served as an example to me, and it was very important to him to provide opportunities for others, particularly opening up opportunities for minorities to participate in the business community here in Greenville. And he was also passionate about doing likewise for women. He was a medical doctor, but he was also a businessman. And so as I grew up, it was important to me to do my part. And so not only in my career, but in the community organizations that I've been involved in, I guess the difference that I've had is that I think about these things all the time, whether they are young people, whether they're minority colleagues, whether they are women who are in my firm, in the organizations I belong to. I don't know why, but I'm always thinking about what can I do to try to make it an easier or more open pathway for them to participate.
That's great. That's great. I mean, clearly, we do all have influences from our childhood and our upbringing, and I think that's an important piece as well. And so you get to influence activity, decisions, make opportunities occur because of that difference. Somebody instilled that in you, and you've carried that on, and you've made a difference in your community because of it. So that's exciting. Anything to add about your difference? I'm passing the mic. Great. Yeah, you may. Sure.
Well, first of all, thanks for having us, and we're far more alike than we are different. I would start by saying that. And my journey in medicine is a lot different than most of my colleagues. So I guess I would answer that way, which was I was a high school basketball coach and a middle school teacher, and really enjoying that. And for fun, I decided to volunteer in hospitals at night. This will get to my why.
There you go.
What I experienced there was something almost ineffable, but I looked at what people were doing in those hospitals late at night, and I said to myself, I want that. And I couldn't even tell you what that was, but when you looked and you go into a hospital, it is actually the most diverse, inclusive cross-section of humanity every day. There's white there, black there, green there, blue there. There's unbelievable joy, unbelievable tragedy. There's every emotion, and it's happening like this. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be in that. And a pathway to do that was to become a doctor. There have been no doctors in my family. I took my sciences in college. But I had something pulling me forward because I wanted that. I wanted my life in that sphere. And so I dropped what I was doing. I went back to school. I took all of the pre-med classes that I didn't take in college, and ended up in medicine. And I had two very strong sisters and a very strong mother, still do. It makes sense to me that I wanted to be in women's health care and honor and help advance women in the sphere in which I can do it. So, and we can talk more about that later. That's sort of a little bit about my journey here.
Good, good. So I'm gonna come over here and share the mic with you. So that's good. So I agree, we are more alike than we are different, and that is why your difference makes you unique and gives you a little bit of an advantage, but you probably will find you have a lot in common with individuals when you start building a network and having a conversation. I think that will make a whole nother world open up for you, and you could feel confident that you have something in common. I'll tell a quick story, and then I'm gonna ask another question here. When I was in corporate America in the very beginning, I found that when I walked in a room, the men were bonding, it seemed like, over sports. And so I felt like, gosh, I'm not a sports person. I don't really follow sports. So I went and got all kinds of alerts on my phone so that I could know what happened last night, because I was so intimidated by what I didn't know that I didn't stop to take time to figure out what we did have in common, and maybe I can bond over what we had in common naturally and not try to fit in to a situation that does not speak to me. So I think it's a very fair point. Let's talk a little bit about the influences that you were mentioning. What called you to serve women in the capacity that you serve them today?
Thanks. So I mentioned my two sisters and my mom, but I'll tell you, in my role as medical director and chair for women's services at GHS, I really had a decision to make, and what I realized is these decisions were preordained because of the way I'm wired. But in OB-GYN, 85% of the workforce are women. Mm-hmm. And that's been when I'm speaking from the level of physicians. So when I'm talking about our physician workforce, it's been predominantly a very attractive and growing women's field, and Krista mentioned this, many women have a lot of duties other than being a professional, and that it can include, depending on your life choices, trying to be a mom, trying to be a spouse, trying to be a significant other, and that's hard. And I want to tell you a quick story. I was a fellow in cancer training at the Cleveland Clinic. I got a page. I went to a room, and it was a classmate of mine from medical school. Now this is 12 years later. She's dying of cancer. Has 3 little kids, aged 10, 12, and 14. And she and I started having a conversation. She started crying, and her tears were all about regret that she had ever gone into medicine. Because she wasn't the PTA president. She didn't bake cookies for the school event. She couldn't go to her son's soccer game or to a play. At that very moment, all 3 kids and her husband walked in. And she told me not to leave. And she began downloading all of her regrets to her kids. I'm sorry I wasn't at that event. I'm sorry I wasn't at the PTA. I'm sorry I wasn't at your play. And her kids, who literally saved her soul at that very moment, said, Mom, you got this wrong. You got this wrong. When you weren't there, we were telling our friends, you know why my mom's not here? My mom's a doctor. My mom's doing surgery right now. We couldn't be more proud of her. And that has stuck with me for 25 years. And so when I'm figuring out how to promote and acknowledge how hard it is for women, acknowledge it, and then it's funny, you were talking about, I was making notes yesterday. My third point was make room for them. Mm-hmm. So I don't care how complex your life schedule is, I'm going to make it work for you at work. You can't be there for morning meetings, fine, find a way around it. And that can never be a barrier to allow them to advance in the workplace. And so from my perspective, I had those earlier experiences, and I was just committed to making it work for those people because this is a powerful and wonderful source of great leadership, and shame on us if we don't figure out a way to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good for you. And I have to just tell you that my son was the last kid picked up from daycare every day, and he does not know that. He would not tell you that that's his memory of daycare. And I may have told this group before, I was the mom that made the choice that you could not have, he was a basketball player, so you may not have the spaghetti dinner at my house, but I will buy the spaghetti and you can have it somewhere else, but you cannot have it here.
You learn how to cook it.
Yes, right. So you have to make choices, right? It gets back to making choices. And I loved your feedback on what you would do to make it work for a woman in the workplace. That is called fit. You, like a woman that can find that fit in their employer, a person who can find that fit in their employer is better off if that's going to meet the needs of their life. So that's incredible. How about other best practices for women in the workplace that maybe you've employed or maybe you've put into practice or even experienced? Either one of you. I have your mic. Oh, gotcha.
Let's see. And I have so much I want to comment on that Chip said, but let me answer a best practice. I think something critical, whether you're in a large organization like a hospital system, my law firm is 70, 75 total employees, so it's much smaller, but something that's absolutely critical is having true friendships. Now, friendships at different levels, because once you get to friendships, you can get beyond. There's a certain amount of professionalism and platitudes that you need to have a formality with many people. But to get to the level where you can say, I'm so sad that I missed the spaghetti dinner. Or my son, we had a bunch of things happen at work recently, and he was in my office, and we were supposed to go to Carowinds for his birthday, and we couldn't go, and he was devastated. But I couldn't let others around me know because they needed me to perform as a lawyer. So I had, what we did is we pretended we were on roller coasters outside, like literally took pictures, pretending, and he laughed, and we went later. But you need those friendships, those safe spaces that you can go and say, I'm sad, I'm scared, this is hard, and then turn around and be like, yes, the first item on our agenda is this, and you absolutely need that. And you can get it at different levels. You can get it from your bosses, your mentors, your sponsors, and you can get it from the front desk the person who you're greeting at the receptionist, who will know, like, oh, the reason why I'm putting this here is because I forgot to get clean clothes. My kid doesn't have any socks, so they're coming by. Thank you so much. She's like, no problem. I got you. You need it. Friendships matter. Now, how do you do that? We have affinity groups. We have a group that meets every week, every month, where women get together. But you also need to have lunches. You need to stop by offices. You need to talk about it in hiring. So it needs to be both an informal and formal process. And it's critical that you get beyond the formal requirements of saying we want 20% in leadership, or we want to meet our client expectations or the patient expectations, or we want to meet market expectations matter, and that will drive those statistics. But getting beyond that to talking about, well, let's talk about why it's so hard to get to that morning meeting for the mother. It's not because she's going to the spa, as you know. I mean, she was up well before that, and she's got to get the kids to school, and if you just make these small changes. But to get to that honest conversation requires true friendships.
Could not agree more. Could not agree more.
So the question is best practices. What do you do to try to have a more diverse and inclusive workplace? We do a number of things, not only locally, but firm-wide. I have the good fortune of being in a firm which, with a lot of wonderful colleagues. Our Greenville office is one of 50 offices around the country, and so we have a perspective locally as well as firm-wide. But the things, just for example, the things that we do firm-wide is that we are very intentional about involving women in all layers of leadership, whether it's from the board of directors, whether it's the compensation committee, whether it's the board of directors advisory committee. We try to understand where we are and where we need to be, and we've had some great success with that. The other thing is, when you're a lawyer, the way you progress through a firm, quite frankly, is you have to have business. And so we are very intentional and purposeful about trying to give platforms and opportunities and forums for our women lawyers to learn how to develop business by providing practice leaders and business development leaders in our firm to discuss with them those kinds of best practices. But we try to put it into action by giving them opportunities to interface. The fact is that I guess about half of the lawyers or students in law school now are women. That's the reality, and in addition to that, many of our clients, we work through general counsels, and a large proportion of them are women as well. And so if you want to grow business, you have to be interfacing with the people who can provide the business, so we do it that way. Another thing that we do is through benchmarking, and what we've found, and I've observed in other organizations, is when you apply for recognition in something like, are you a diverse organization, or are you an organization that provides opportunities for women, and you don't get the award, you have to look inside yourself and ask, why is that, and what can we do better? And maybe the next following year we'll have more success. But when you apply for these kinds of things, it helps you understand where you are relative to your peers and what you can do to improve. And so I think it's not just about the recognition and the nice piece of glass that you put in your reception area, but what it says about you as an organization.
Exactly. So if I build on the 2 points there, what you place value on is critically important when you think about the company you choose to be a part of. So if you value an organization that allows for relationships to be built, then you want to find a company that is going to also value that. And you can do that in the hiring process. That's a two-way street right there. That's a two-way conversation. You're the talent, and the company's looking for talent. They're the employer, and you're looking to be paid. So both parties want something in that exchange. You should be doing as much of the interviewing of the company as they are of you to know if they value things that you value. The awards in the lobby, that's another way to do that research. I pulled up the website, but certainly if you walk in, you can see what they're proud of. What have they been able to achieve? Where did they hang that in their office? What can they tell you about it? It's a great question to ask. I see that you've been awarded with X. What can you tell me about that award? How did the firm get that award? Think about how you can ask those questions so that you find an organization that you value. I wanted to hear a little bit more about ways that you make room for women. So you mentioned the benchmarking and the fact that 50% of law students are women, so you recognize that that's who's coming through. They need to feel welcomed and they bring value to your firm. Are there other examples maybe in your industry that you make room for women to excel through the path of being a doctor?
Well, I can speak to OB-GYN. We have 24 trainees right now in our training program, and 20 of them are women. And that's the same year after year after year. So that's our reality, and I wouldn't want it any other way. We specifically make room, and I think there's some similarities here. The theme I'm hearing is the intentionality of making sure that our workforce reflects our community, reflects our patients, reflects our clients, reflects the people we serve, and those don't get out of kilter and stop reflecting each other. So we do a lot of both intra-departmental leadership development, and I personally am very intentional about making sure women get a chance at any of those opportunities. Most of our practices are led by a managing partner. Most of those are women. Many of our divisions are led by women. And I think to your point earlier, these are not appointed to women because they're women. You make sure that you've got a diverse pool of candidates and pick the most competent person. And you've got to keep making sure that your slate includes every possibility that's out there, and then apply the same rigor. The GHS as a whole is very committed and intentional about developing diverse leaders, whether it's women or other. And it's reflected in our management. If you look across GHS, we've not only said those words, we've made them come true. Our chief financial officer is a woman, for example. That's a men's world. And I chaired that search committee, and I remember going through the first slate or two, and of course it was all 50-year-old men. And I remember Mike Reardon called me up and said, dig deeper, dig deeper. So I went back and worked with our search firm, said we got to dig deeper. And lo and behold, the digging revealed and brought forth a woman who was at a pretty high level in the Duke system, that somehow we had missed each other at the first pass or two. Great example of being committed and intentionality and finding those people out there. And then we hired the most qualified person, which was her. So we have lots of stories like that, but I think it's the intentionality to make sure that you keep pushing and keep trying to make room for those folks.
That's great. So where else that comes up is in my line of work, for example, you have sales jobs and you have staff jobs, essentially is how it breaks out. Sales jobs or technical jobs tend to be held by a majority of men, because that's kind of who applied for it. That's who went out and thought they could do it. And then a lot of our staff jobs, women maybe start in a sales role at the entry level, but they migrate somewhere along the way to a staff job. Staff jobs might be customer service or human resources. There's nothing wrong with the staff world. We need all of those folks. Remember, I started in the staff position. But what we see happen is this migration where women are moving from, let's call it, line jobs to staff jobs. And guess where CEOs come from?
Sales. Line
jobs, sales jobs, technical jobs. That is where the majority of CEOs are hired. In fact, in 2015, 90% of CEOs were hired from a line job, and 100% of them were men. So it gets down to being intentional, digging deep, looking. That's the business part of it. As women, we have to ask ourselves, where do we want to be at the end of this journey? And are we aligning ourselves to get there? And if not, why not? How can we change that perspective? Because we are capable. You just heard great examples of being competent, capable, and the right person for the job. And oh, by the way, you maybe just happen to be a woman. It's possible. I want to turn it to you all in a moment, so make sure you're getting ready for your questions. I'd like to just hear from your perspective as a woman in your field. What would you say has been your greatest challenge? So we've talked about the differences that you bring. We've talked about how you have maneuvered in terms of relationships to bring it all together. What would you say has been one of your biggest challenges as being a woman in your field?
That's such a hard question. I think one of the hardest challenges is it being such uncharted territory that you want to know that you're doing right by your children, you want to know you're doing right by your company, by your community. People will say, live according to your values, live according to your truth. I've had someone say, just live your truth. Well, my truth is that I want to be a good mother, I want to be an excellent lawyer, I want to be a good leader, I want to be a good friend. So that one of the most complex things to navigate is that those things come in conflict. And there's no right answer every day. You get it wrong, you go to sleep at night sometimes and your heart sort of sinks saying, today I got it wrong. And other days you leap for joy because you got it right. And a point that was brought up in the story about the mother who was a doctor is that your children and your friends and your clients, the ones you want to keep, actually recognize, it's an important point, actually recognize that resilience in you. They appreciate it. There are some days, absolutely, my 9 or 12-year-old run up and give me a hug. They can tell I've had a hard day, and I do the same for them, and they appreciate it. I'm human. But man, it's not easy, and it's uncharted, and it's not like you go read a book like you do for how to make a cake, or even when you're reading, the CEOs, Steve Jobs, how he did Apple. I mean, show me the book to read when you're trying to, be a working mom, mother. And by the way, I care about the community. I really want to be involved in my kids' school, and I really want to be on certain boards, and I really want to volunteer time. But there's only still 24 hours in my day, just like in Philip's day. We have to make choices, and they have consequences, and sometimes the consequences, I don't like them. But I just keep going down that uncharted territory the best I can, and you have to be forgiving of yourself. I want to say that. You have to be very forgiving of yourself. You have to be willing. I think people are, but it seems women are particularly hard on themselves, so you have to figure out a way to, pat yourself on your back and celebrate, too, when you're getting it right. And one other point I want to make, because when I look out in the room, actually something I see are things that helped me over the last 15 years with my career that are not within Wyche. So one thing that you can do that's within your control and finding a fit and thinking about consequences is you can actually create things to help you in your career outside of your job. So let me give you specific examples. I work in real estate, also a man's world. It's a dirt industry, as they say. Although I say that, there's one of the best real estate professionals ever in Greenville, who's Ann Ellison, and she's a female, extraordinary female. Maybe 8-10 years ago, it came to my attention that other communities have a networking organization for women in real estate. South Carolina had none. South Carolina doesn't have to have none. You can start one. Sure enough, I go to other women, I say, are you interested? It takes a lot of work, but in creating that networking organization that exists outside of me, totally separate from me today, continues to help women and men, you sort of create a fit and a control and a consequence that your job didn't necessarily provide. So that's an example in this room, because I see crew friends here. Another example, I served on boards that had nothing to do with my job. They just aligned with my passions. And there's a board member in here. We served on a board many years ago. We have done business together. We were talking about business this morning. Did we start working together for business? No. We shared a common passion at the time for the YWCA. We spent a lot of time together. We got to know each other. We became friends. We trusted each other. That is one of the best ways to create control fit, because you create opportunities for you could have never foreseen. It's in your work life, but not necessarily in your company. And those are really important things to think about, sort of creatively outside of the narrow scope of what's presented right in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Thank you for that. And if I could just add, that's why it's so important to evaluate consequence, in my opinion, so that you can expect it and you can accept it, because they will happen. Sometimes you will like them, sometimes you will not, but they are going to occur. And so if you can expect it, then you can accept it and move on and not feel defeated or held back by it or be guilty because of it. You can actually find a new way to reinvent a moment by maybe creating something different, having a whole new passion that comes to life. So I think those are great examples. Great examples. How about we'll go down the line here and I'll ask you each the same question, and then it's going to be your turn, so hope you're ready. What was the best advice you've ever received? Be it in the field you're in today, the job you're in today, or in some other capacity. It's advice that you've applied to your own career and the way that you work through life. And if you had to share it, it's worth other people hearing.
Can I have two?
You can.
Okay.
You can.
I have two. When you are a young lawyer, you've just gotten out of law school and you've got a great job, you think you are king of the world or queen of the world. And you learn fairly quickly that you're not as important as you think thought you were. And over time you listen to lawyers who are older than you and you pick up a few things. And I've got a couple of tips I want to share with you. One is, I had a colleague that told me, or maybe a group of us, just shared his experience that it's so very important when you are out in the community to not be critical of your colleagues, to speak positively. Now that doesn't mean that Ogletree is perfect by any means, but it's so very important to speak positively about your organization. There's no downside to that. There is plenty of downside to speaking negatively about your organization and about your colleagues. And so I've applied that throughout my career. Whenever the question about a colleague comes up, I don't take the opportunity to join in the sort of the teasing or the critique. I try to speak positively about my colleagues, and I think that applies to this topic that we're speaking about here. The other piece of advice that has been almost as important is to when a client is talking, you must listen. Do not interrupt your client. And if you're in the middle of speaking and your client interrupts you, stop speaking. And I can tell you, it's an amazing skill to be able to acquire, because in my experience, some of the best conversations my clients have had with me were conversations where I hardly said a word. Okay, think about that. So I think this also applies to this topic, because it's a skill that I think men or women can apply for trying to be successful. Your clients or your customers, they just want you to listen to them. And if you will be active in your listening skill, I think you'll be very successful.
Yeah, great advice.
Okay, two things. A lot of things jump out, of course, but one, my grandmother, who helped me go to college and was a housekeeper in a hospital system here in Greenville, she was making $6 an hour when she retired and helped me go to college. Think about that. And I still visit her. She's in Greenville. That's why I came back to Greenville. And she has always said since I was a little girl, Maurie, you can do anything. Now she is from a textile, she was in a textile mill. That's her story. She doesn't even know necessarily what that means, but man, did I internalize that. I still do. Like, my grandmother thinks I can do anything. And I realize not every child has someone telling them that, or adult, but that is so important to believe and internalize. Like, there is something intrinsically very valuable. It creates a shield around you. And so I have to mention that, because my grandmother sort of just is always near. Now, to make it very real, this morning I went to a table of friends and I said, oh, this is going to make it very real for you guys. I haven't prepared. I'm tired. My kids were up last night. I hope I do a good job. I hope they don't ask too hard questions on this panel. And Megan, a dear friend, really close friend of mine, said, Maurie, if you could see how other people see you. And I think that is really good advice, because I see like, I hope I match, I hope I brush my hair. I mean, that's how my morning went. But my friend said, you're here. And Krista told her story, right? But there's a magic in that, because there's a realness. I'm not coming here to say, it's so easy, you can do it too, you can do it. No, it's really hard. So have good friends, but know you can do anything. Those are the great pieces of advice.
Agreed.
So there's a movie out right now called Wonder Woman. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at Nikki. I'm looking at Mary, friends in the audience. I'm looking at all of you. And I have 25 years of counseling employees, many of whom are women. And my experience is that they tend to fall into a feeling of being inadequate. I'm inadequate as a doctor, I'm inadequate as a mom, I'm inadequate. And this is a really good conversation that we're having, because what I have always tried to say is, just like that story I told you about my friend who died, no, you've got it wrong. We think you're Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. And you are. And very hard on themselves, very high standards, trying to achieve in all these different domains that are truly competing for your time and your heart and your energy, and you find a way to do it. So just know that when we're looking at you, we think you're wonderful. So just know that and believe that. So I was a brand new intern. That's right after medical school, and I actually had a name tag that says doctor on it, except you don't know anything. And remember, when you graduate from law school, you get a job as a lawyer. When you graduate from med school, you don't get a job as a doctor. You're a resident. You're qualified to do nothing except sign up for 8 more years of training, right, Mary? Right. And so you really don't know too much. And I remember getting advice from a nurse, and I, like my co-panelists up here, thought I knew more than I did. And I ignored that advice, and I had a very senior attending pull me aside and say, she doesn't speak doctor talk, but she knows a lot more than you do. I've never forgotten that. People don't have to speak with the same competency, the same words, but acknowledge their expertise in whatever form it arrives in your life. And then the second one, I was a brand new attending. That's when you actually are a doctor and you can go out and independently take care of people. And had a patient die in the operating room who was very sick, but I took it very personally. And honestly, first time in my life, I wanted to quit. And no accident, it just so happened that I was in Maine at the time, and my parents were living with us for a month while Mom was getting breast cancer treatment. And I got home late, and my dad, who's someone with very few words, I told him how I felt, and he said, you've worked too hard, and there are way too many people that you have not met yet who need you. Mm-hmm. You need to get back up and go to work tomorrow. And that was exactly what I needed at the right time. So the two things that I keep writing here through the hard days, and ways to make sure I'm getting information from all the people around. So those are mine.
That's great. I'll just add, I have one. Mine is, I grew up, as I mentioned, in a particular kind of community where we had learned and heard over and over again that we were a product of our environment. And because we were a product of our environment, there were programs for you and things that you could be a part of, and maybe it can fix you. And then I met somebody that said, people, you, are a product of your choices. And now that is the advice that I pass on to others. I do strongly believe in the power of choice, because it is what you own and you can make. And as you go through life at work or even in your personal life, remember, it's the choices you make that will deliver an outcome. And that's what I'm a product of. And I think we are all products of that. So with that, I want to make sure we get some questions from the audience.
Maybe for one, just one.
Just one. She's like, you've been promising questions, but listen, one. Okay, yes. I'll get a good one. This will be a good one.
Hi, my name is Deakins. I'm the founder of Workspace, and I have a question specifically for the men. So,
Okay.
of course, in your workspace, you have a lot of influence, but what do you do to influence your peers, the people that you're breaking bread with, and your friends, and the young boys coming up, to make sure that they're
coming from the perspective of my career as a lawyer, and I'm an employment lawyer, I advise clients on how to comply with the employment laws. And when you are an employment firm, you have that sort of context, plus you have kind of an obligation to not just tell people what to do, but to do it yourself. So I think what I try to share is maybe three things. The business case for diversity inclusion. First of all, it's the right thing to do. That's why we're here. We all understand it's a moral imperative. I have a daughter. I want my daughter to have just as much opportunity as my son. I love them both equally, and so that's, to me, I want all my colleagues to have the same opportunities, and so I try to reflect that in my conversations with my colleagues. The second thing is it's just good business. If the women in our practice are successful, then we'll be successful. If they have bigger books of business, then I'll make more money. I hate to sound cold-blooded about it, but it doesn't make any business sense at all to treat women differently than men. So doesn't it make sense to put them in leadership roles? Doesn't it make sense to try to give them a platform so that they can increase their business? So I think there's a strong business element to this. And the third is, it's the law, okay? If I'm going out and advising clients on how to comply with the law, we have to do what we tell our clients to do. And I try to explain to clients, if you're treating women more fairly in the workplace, they're going to be more productive and you're going to get more work out of them. If you try to create opportunities for them, as in our business model, they will make more money for you. But on top of that, it's what the law requires. And so I would answer your question that way.
Very good.
So my 12-year-old daughter has literally professorial knowledge of mythology. She learned the Greek alphabet. She knows all the gods and goddesses and the entire genealogy. And she can tell you the Roman version, the Greek version, and she has about a 4-foot statue of Athena in her bedroom. No kidding. So I'm under a lot of pressure, both at work and at home, to get it right and to acknowledge the power of women. And yes, there's an obvious business case, because that's half the world and more than half of our potential colleagues. But I think the specific question was holding your peers accountable. And I have personally witnessed, and I think it's unconscious bias, peers, other chairs making statements like, unless someone works full-time, they can't be in a leadership role. So there's a moment of critical truth there when what I chose to do was to challenge that in a gentle way, saying that's old school thinking. You can have an incredibly talented and emerging leader who needs to work 0.8 because she chooses to be a mom and a mother and has got to get kids to school and needs a half a day here or there. And if her FTE status isn't quite 1.0, who cares? And so I think it's challenging each other when we see that injustice. I think it's an injustice, and it's a lost opportunity. So I think we've got to keep being willing to put that voice in the room and call people out on it. It can be in a loving and gentle way, but you don't have to think that way. That's old school thinking. So that's sort of a promise I keep as I go through my day.
Very good. Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining me here. I think we're going to turn it over to Kelly, and we'll carry on with the rest of our program. She's probably going to need us back. How about a round of applause for the Kelly?